the Center for Information Development Management, which Adobe has been a long-time member of, again in 1998. I've written 9 books so far, one about a year ago on the Excellence Standard, and was one of the original founders of the OASIS committee supporting the DITA standard, and then served as STC president in 1992 and 93. What we've always been interested in here is really providing, helping technical communicators find ways to make their customers successful. I think it's that path to successful information is really critical. It involves information development, process maturity, structured information design. I think more and more so today, research with your customers and competitors in some cases, knowing really what your customers are trying to do, what their goals are, finding good content management solutions, which I'm sure people will talk about the rest of the day today at the conference. And then we're involved in both education and training for people in the field, and we've worked with everybody over a number of years. So that's just a little bit about kind of the direction that we think is really important for this whole industry. So what I want to talk about today, though, is this notion that I started playing with probably 25 years ago. We held a really interesting session once at an STC conference, and we asked this question: are you documenting the same product that marketing is selling? And we had speakers from both marketing and from technical communication on the panel, and we concluded, of course, that in many cases we weren't, and we needed really to look at why that was happening. What was the problem of communicating effectively across all of these different centers of excellence, centers of customer contact? How do we communicate much more effectively? How do we bring people together? So that was a goal of a long time ago, and it continues to be, I know for many of you, a really important goal today. So I wanted to start out with a little bit of a story. This is what I call the cell phone saga. Back in the beginnings of cell phones, I was interested in getting a cell phone, kind of the brick style that you see in the picture there. And one of my decision points in selecting a product was looking for a cell phone that would really help me make calls to my bank, right? When I called the bank and had to log in, I had to type an 11-digit number into the phone. And I thought, well, one of these high-tech cell phones, wouldn't it be nice if I could program that password or membership ID into the phone, so I wouldn't have to type all 11 digits every time. Frequently, of course, getting 1 or 2 of them wrong and having to start all over again. So I found a phone that provided that functionality. It was in all of their marketing literature that what they could do was let me program a number and send it, on my phone call. And the phone arrived. I looked at the documentation, since cell phones were new at the time, and this was the first one I had, and could not find anywhere in the documentation any explanation of how to do the primary function that had made me buy the phone. Looked all the way through it. Now, where in the world is this? I can't find it anywhere. Well, what you see on the right side of the screen was their attempt to explain how to do what I had purchased the phone to primarily to handle. And of course, I didn't even notice it was there. It wasn't didn't have a title that meant anything to me. The instructions were cryptic. It was completely incomprehensible, and I had no idea that this is what I wanted, and this is what marketing had sold me as a useful function. So if I think today how I might translate this in a way that would mean that the documentation and the marketing message would be the same, what you'd see is something like this. in order to save that passcode or PIN code, as they used to be called, and sends it automatically. Use it to do this. Now, here's a nice structured presentation, a really user-oriented title, a short description, a context statement, and then some instructions. Just exactly what I would have needed if marketing and documentation had gotten together and agreed that the content needed to support the story. And this is the problem, I think, that many of us face when we're trying to handle content that is coming from lots of different directions and really collaborate with other people who are creating content with us. Well, I can talk about somebody who's gotten it right. Over the number of years ago, we worked closely with Kohler to help them move into structured authoring. And one of the things that continues to impress me, and I put this very long URL down at the bottom of your screen, is that Kohler seems to have understood the message. If I go and look at the new touchless kitchen faucet, which is a very intriguing product, I find the marketing information, information about how wonderful a product it is and the great things it does, as you can see at the top of the screen. I've moved these things around, by the way, to get them in one presentation. It doesn't look exactly like this. But there's all that information about the faucet and why I should buy it. It's got this great new technology. A simple wave of the hand can turn it on and off. Well, that sounds really great, but I wonder how easy it is to install it. How complicated is this thing? Can I do it myself? Do I need to hire a professional? Well, right on that same screen, I can find the spec sheet. I can find the installation guide and the care guide with the service parts listed. If I were a plumber, I might be interested in that. I can find it without the service parts. I can get all the information I need in text. But probably even more importantly, I can also watch a video about the installation. And in fact, I did watch the video, and watching the video convinced me that I should hire somebody to do this. It was pretty complicated. But there I could look at the installation guide and watch the video, because I probably wouldn't use either of them when I got under the sink. And there was Kohler combining the marketing information and the technical information and the installation videos all in one environment, in one place to help them sell the product. Well, one of the things we learned long ago from Kohler is that they expected people to go to their website to find the installation and care guides before they purchased a product. A do-it-yourselfer would want to find out, like I did, is it possible for me to do this? And a plumber might come to the same page to find out how complicated a new installation they'd never done before might be, and what it might be, what it might cost, or what they might quote a customer to do the job. So that kind of combination of knowing what the user's real important goal is became an integrated presentation between marketing content and technical content, as well as video content, of course. And what we see in this is that throughout the organization, lots and lots of parts of that organization, and I've just named a few here, are creating content. We found human resources departments creating employee manuals and doing it in laborious, difficult ways that could be improved with structured authoring and with data development. Content's being produced throughout the organization, but there's rarely any collaboration or really even any discussion of how people could be working together. And much of that content is rarely curated. That means it's rarely brought together and with good strategy and good decisions about what content goes where, who creates what. Are we telling the same story in all of those places? Are we using the best practices to create that content? Can we help the legal department find a better way to create their content? Can we ensure that the support organization has the resources that they need? These are the kinds of things that really lend themselves to the issues of collaboration. It is possible for more people to collaborate and compete in real time with more other people on more different kinds of work than any previous time in history. It's a great quote. I think it's the kind of thing that we need to really appreciate and understand and act upon in a very specific way. And I'm going to try to explain some of the things that I think will make us more successful in our move toward collaboration. One of those pieces, of course, will be content curation. So what do we really mean by collaboration? What does it take to get everybody going in the same direction when it comes to content? Well, one of those, of course, is to do a comprehensive inventory. What are the things that are being created in our organization? We found in one project, for example, that salespeople were using technical content to create their new sales proposals, their proposals going out to customers. They were picking up content that was developed in marketing, some of it, and engineering, other pieces, and bringing it together to form their sales proposals. Well, what we discovered in this very large petroleum company is that the salespeople they would find a piece of content and then they keep it on their laptop computers or their desktop computers and use the content to put together their proposals. Well, as a result, it turned out that the proposals were full of out-of-date, incorrect content because there was no central repository where all of those pieces of content that went into new business proposals were collected. So we need to identify what are the key characteristics of each of those pieces of content that we want to bring together. We want to make sure are current and up to date. So in a project that we did for a company that makes industrial pumps, we gave the sales team access to content stored in the repository in the content management system that had been written, tested, approved by engineering and marketing that described the characteristics of the products in correct terms. And we made that through a SharePoint functionality, made that content accessible to the sales team. The sales team could select products that they were interested in. They would get the best pictures, the most current descriptions, the list of features, and then they could use that information automatically from their desktops to create new product proposals and also to create product subsets of brochures to bring to a sales meeting with a customer. We could find, for example, instances where there was content overlap, where we had almost the same content with marketing or sales or service, but not quite. And how could we eliminate the overlaps and have one single source, one goal source of content that could be used across the organization? Throughout this, of course, we were looking for methods of reducing the workload on everybody. Why should it take an organization months, 6 months to put out a new product brochure when the photograph of the product, the key benefits, and the description of the product already existed? Well, in that case, reducing work meant taking a 6-month process down to a 6-minute process. Pretty amazing changes once people started working together. And this was a collaboration between technical content development and the people in marketing who developed the product brochures. Well, can we bring those things together? Well, let me tell you about some other examples of amazing content collaboration. The IBM Systems Magazine has been a publication for years and years and years, has very loyal people subscribing to that. 84% of the people who subscribe to the Systems Magazine have been subscribing for 3 years or more. And in the studies that they've done, they found that the average customer spends 15 minutes on every issue reading the content. I mean, that's pretty amazing loyalty, right? In fact, 46% of the customers save the issues so they can reference them in the future. Well, what's the connection? Subscriptions lead to more purchases. Finding out about the new latest technology means that people are deciding to buy those things, right? And in fact, the website visits increased for this publication from 28,000 visits in 2002 to 90,000 in 2015. So how did this happen? You know, what happens at IBM to bring content together? Well, they developed something called Total Information Experience, the TIE program. And the TIE program included all of these things: user experience, better process, better infrastructure, but the user was at the center. It meant creating a content board, a corporate team that provided strategy, leadership, tools to help align all the products to go in the same direction. All the brands participated. And the corporate team then assigned, managed the work of the advisory council for the brands. Brand leadership. Can we bring the brands together? Because IBM, like many of your companies, produces lots of very, very different products. How do we include everyone to come up with a uniform information experience for our customers when we need to include all the brands? Well, then the third step of this were the community councils, which coordinated across the brands to develop internal standards and support deployment of the standards to all of the groups so that everybody was producing information in the same effective way. Total information experience, real collaboration in place, right? And what were they trying for? They were trying for consistency. They were trying to bring things together so that the same approach to content was happening throughout the corporation. And that's been a very successful enterprise activity for years now to bring all of that together. Well, 2 years ago, we heard from about a collaboration that was really impressive at Salesforce. Salesforce team, in a collaboration between marketing and information development, created the Salesforce Trailhead project, which was designed to make it fun to learn how to use Salesforce. In some of the organizations, the lack of writing resources or concern that the writers might not know the product well enough, often leads to problems with the connection between developers and project teams. And this kind of experience then becomes so important, I think, for people to really work together to work really more successfully in getting content to work in a way that everyone wanted to address it effectively. At Salesforce, the response to this collaboration between marketing and information development has been phenomenal. There's a massive community response. Even people who don't necessarily own the product will go and follow the Trailhead games and earn their stickers and have a good time doing it, and hopefully recommend the product then to other people. Leadership at Juniper has meant the development of a technical leadership council. The goal of the council has been to raise the technical abilities of everyone who's involved. He said, we need to be certain that our technical communication professionals really have the backgrounds they need in the product to be extremely effective. We need to work together to work closely with engineering to provide active assistance to our customers. And we need to decrease the time it takes to curate and review and develop our technical content. And they've been successful with the Leadership Council in putting that together. They work with the engineering teams, and it means that the content is more ready than ever before, less tedious for everybody to review, and really, providing greater opportunities for the writers to work closely with the engineering team. A number of years ago, we worked closely with Compaq Computer on a co-authoring project that was, I think, a hallmark of successful collaboration between technical information developers and technical experts. Compaq, as you know, was purchased by Hewlett-Packard some time ago, but this story still continues to be a good one. The idea was to create a series of very highly technical content, not procedural content, but primarily conceptual content about the networks and the products that Compaq was developing. And they really needed technical experts who were, expensive and short on time. So they combined senior technical writer with a technical expert to co-produce a series of volumes called Tech Notes. When we were working with Compaq doing a customer study and bringing some of those highly technically skilled customers into discussions about what they needed from documentation, we showed them a series of Tech Notes during a focus group meeting. And it almost completely destroyed the focus group meeting because the customer experts didn't want to give up the Tech Notes. Everybody was sitting in the room at the focus group reading Tech Notes because they were so compelling and had such valuable information. And we had to agree at the end of the focus group to send each participant an entire stack of the current Tech Notes so that they could have them at home or have them at the office, because they found the content so valuable. Well, in many of these instances, those Tech Notes were developed by senior information developers, highly skilled and with a lot of expertise, working closely with an expert, and basically what we call ghostwriting the initial manuscripts from the interviews, and then having the technical expert, of course, review for the technical details, and really working as a partnership together. Now, of course, one of the problems I think that happens when all of these parts of the organization are working to produce content, if there's not an overall strategy for how the collaboration works, as I've been describing, or how the right decisions are made about bringing that content together. Because what can happen when you have lots of collaboration and lots of people contributing to content is content overload. And that's when curation as an important activity, I think, becomes the purview of the information developers moving forward today. Because not all content should be published. I'm sure you've heard the statement that everyone has a gigantic novel in their heads that they would love to promote and get out there. We also know that when we look at company websites and we look at the analytics, we find out that there's sometimes a very high percentage of content that has never been accessed by anyone, that no one has ever looked at. In the last few years, we've been following projects that have been designed to reduce the amount of content available that are in the websites, to make the content more uniform and more slimmed down, so that people are likely then to find what they're looking for. So curation begins to happen. Let's decide what is the content that's going to be most valuable, and what content maybe we either hide from view except for specialist customers, or we remove it entirely. So what does curation mean? It says find the content that's out there, analyze it carefully, look at the statistics from your analytics about what people are using and what they're finding and what is best valuable. Follow the comments that customers make about content. If you get feedback from them, was this valuable? Did it have the information people needed? Could they find what they needed? What if you discover, for example, the customers are telling you they can't find what they need, but you know it's there? Well, maybe it is buried in the midst of lots and lots of other irrelevant content, something that doesn't help anybody do anything. So the analysis, I think, in many cases, as we know, over and over again, leads to the removal of content that people are not looking at. We had a particularly great story that came out of friends, managers in the telecommunications industry. They were faced with a very large administrative guide, some 800 pages, I think, of very detailed information, procedures, and lots of features and feature function overviews and conceptual information. And they decided to take a big chance in their curation process. They decided to strip out everything that wasn't a procedure. That got the document down to about 1/4 of its original size, from 800 pages to 200 pages. And they put the information out there, right, with the next release of the product. So they organized and edited the content. And they watched the customer service calls to see if they'd made the right decision. You know, they were a little nervous about this whole thing. They had reduced this content significantly. And what if the customers were unhappy? Would people start complaining? Would they start calling customer support to get answers to questions that weren't being answered? So they watched. Well, like any product, it usually takes a number of weeks or sometimes months for the new versions of a complex product to make it into the customer's line of vision, to get it up and running. So they waited, and after a few weeks, they began to see a really serious increase in the number of calls to support. Well, documentation manager was very concerned. Oh boy, did this go bad? Are we, people calling because they're finding the information completely inadequate? They'd improved searchability because they'd reduced the amount of content. So people were obviously looking for content. This was the new version of the information. It was on the website. People were looking at it and calling support. Well, when they began to analyze the support calls, they found something really, really interesting. And that was the customers were calling to point out errors in the content. This procedure says the light turns green, but it actually turns orange. Please correct that. This procedure says that such and such happens when I click on an element. Something else happens. The screen doesn't look the same as what you're telling me. Please correct it. Well, what they were finding is that the majority of the calls coming to service, this great increase in the number of calls, was customers finding mistakes. And guess what? Those mistakes had been in those documents for years, and no one had ever looked because there was so much that nobody needed to know. So curating the content, getting it down to a reasonable set of things that were really valuable, had the customers looking at the content. John Carroll, who invented the concept of minimalism in the 1970s in his work at IBM, reported from his research that 90% of customers who receive minimalist manuals actually read them. The rest of them who don't receive minimalist ignore them. So find the content, discover what is there, analyze it, remove what isn't working and isn't needed, organize and edit what remains. Follow the minimalism principles that we've been teaching about for 40 years now. Make sure that your taxonomy and your metadata and your titling and your use of keywords and short descriptions is enhancing searchability in all of the places that people might search, and then publish the content that really matters. This is what curation is about. Well, I thought I'd give you a little background about curation in case you haven't remembered what it is really about. What does it really mean? Well, curation really comes from the museum world, right? Curation means taking that material that is in the archives. As you can see here in this picture on the right, museums like the Colorado Museum of Natural History, which I've had the advantage of going behind the scenes into their storage areas, has thousands and thousands of possible items that could be exhibited. And the curators, that's their title in the museum world, they make choices. They say, well, we have all of this material, but we can't have a meaningful presentation of that material unless we make decisions. We can't obviously show all of it. It's impossible. It's not really very useful to people. We need to make choices and develop presentations that teach and help people learn. Curators and curating, as I learned, are the heart of what makes museums work. Yet the word curator is used in a lot of other contexts, and more today. Curator is a specialist, has expertise, is a custodian, is a content manager, is a cultural programmer, a digital archivist, an editor. All of these, or maybe none of these, are the things that are important, right? So what is the curator? What do these curators have in common? They need to be business professionals and designers and wordsmiths and historians and teachers and archivists and journalists and marketeers and managers and statisticians and accountants and politicians. And all of those are really, really important. And those are the things we learn from the profession of curation. So content curation itself means making lots of decisions about what content is going to be most valuable to customers. I want to quote from Juniper Networks again, because I'm really impressed with what they've done with the concept called Day One Books. Day One Books, as they tell us, gives customers just the information that they need to complete a task on the first day they're using a product. It covers their operating system and their hardware and their networking with straightforward explanations, step-by-step instructions, practical examples, posters. So you're seeing here the page covers of the Day One guides and the posters that support the Day One guides. And who writes them? Well, one of these volumes was written by Martin Brown. Who is Martin Brown? He's a network security engineer and a major customer based in the United Kingdom. And he worked together with Nick, who's a senior network architect for a major ISP based in Scotland, two of them collaborating together on a content about network security, and then working closely with a senior technical writer who is curating the content, making the decisions about what's needed, making sure that this content is usable and readable and effective and is really telling the customer the right story and is successfully promoting the successful use of the product on the first day. So really interesting ways that curation is coming out in these projects that we've been looking at closely. I want to report another one from NetApp. This was a really interesting presentation that the manager a few years ago gave at one of the best practices conferences. They found that technical expertise was in the silos, out in the various development groups. And though if the writers were focusing on what the developers were doing and writing about features and functions, they weren't meeting the customer's needs. The customers needed solutions. This is what the customers were telling them. And those are the things that customers are telling lots of us and lots of companies. We need solutions. We need process and ways that we can make things all work together. Well, the outcome of this at NetApp was the Express Guide. And you can see the skater there going fast, right? On the Express Guide, developing an Express Guide. So how does all this come together? Well, these are high priority subjects. They're challenging to write. It took a while for the technical writing team to find the right formula for bringing this information together, taking information that was in all kinds of disparate publications. Lots of features and functions about products everywhere, but not how all the pieces came together. And the technical communicator, the senior writers who developed the Express Guides became very successful in pulling all the pieces together, bringing them together into a new kind of publication that was really meeting the customer needs. Well, what do we know? How does this work, right? Express Guides, like the Day One Guides, take a cross-functional approach. What is the easiest path for the customer to reach a goal? Not really, it doesn't matter what tools or what technology they might be using. The Express Guides, like the Day One Guides, are partnerships from experts across the organization and the technical writing team that is bringing all of this together, curating the content, making the right decisions about what customers really need. Multiple technology groups are involved. The product management, the technical marketing engineers, customer support, the field staff, all of them contributing to the Express Guides, which are focusing on key customer goals. The last time we heard about the Express Guides, NetApp had produced 15 of them in 4 months with 6 authors in charge. Their target was 10 guides, but a stretch of 17. And they did this on schedule and on budget. 15 was right between their 10 and their 17 of what they wanted to accomplish. The guides are extremely popular. The top 10 documentation pages on their support site are the Express Guides. And they find that Express Guides, about 10 Express Guides are being used per customer. So customers are looking at 10 of these to find things that they need to understand better and need to do. So they've been extremely popular, and all of the pieces came together really, really effectively. And it's really fun to see how well these work. So what do we know now, right? Well, we know that our customers are changing. They're looking for coordinated, curated right set of information coming from all of these places. Information tech docs, right? Training organization, information that developers are putting out for very highly advanced customers. The support team, the marketing team, the folks at customer experience. All of those areas in your organization, and probably more, I could have more colors here, are producing content. But if those pieces of content are all independently produced without coordination and collaboration, they may be going in 100 different directions. They may be causing more chaos than they are solving problems. Customers don't know where to look for the right story. They don't know, how the training material informs the product marketing material, informs the technical communications that are being delivered, informs the support services. If we don't get onto the same page, if we don't really work seriously to accommodate the customer's need for the right information and for the right content, we really aren't going to be successful. We're just going to breed more chaos. So we need to change. Our organizations need to change to accommodate customers' real needs. Customers are asking for new kinds of content delivered in new ways. Oops, fix that bullet. In new ways, new says too, probably. They're looking for a new voice, a voice that is integrated, that's telling the same story in all the places that they look. They want to ensure that what they're looking at is readable and usable, which often means that there needs to be somebody reviewing that content, editing it for language, for voice, for accuracy, testing it, reviewing it, making sure all the content has the same message. It's a big job. But if you walk into the back halls of a museum like the Denver Museum of Natural Sciences, what you find is a collection of content that is 10, 20, 30 times bigger than what is on display. All of this valuable information that can be effectively and interestingly curated to make the right presentations that the customers need. We need to put the customers in the center of our activities, just like the museums do. What you see when you visit a museum is designed for you. You're the customer. You're the person viewing, getting a story from the information that's there. It's not just a big jumble. If you've ever been to a historical museum, a museum that was developed 120, 130 years ago, like you might see in the UK. I visited museums that were created during Victoria's reign, and they're interesting because they're just piles of stuff. They're just display rooms with so many things in them that can't make sense of them. Before curation became important, because curation limits and it tells a story. We need to put the customer at the center of our activities and make sure that all of this information surrounding them is going in the same direction. We need to invest not in everything, but in what customers value the most, what tells the best story. As curators, we need to work across the organization. We need to bring together the information councils, the technical support teams, the people who need to make the decisions to say, let's involve everybody in doing this. So there's a lot of questions these days about how valuable is the profession of information development. we've certainly seen a lot of sort of an attack on the profession. I think as companies have cut budgets and have cut staffs, I'm sure you all know, it's often been the technical communicators who are on the list of people to go. Oh, we don't need those. We can get the engineers to write all the content. Or, maybe we didn't need any of that in the first place. Or we can find less experienced, cheaper and therefore less experienced people to do this job. Well, I think the tide is turning, at least in some places, where with the right direction, with the right collaboration across the enterprise, with the right tool set, with a focus on what customers really need rather than just churning out lots of pages. I think that we're seeing a new recognition, even at the C-level, in our corporations, that content is important. I'm sure you're hearing that throughout this yesterday and today on these sessions, that content is important in our organizations. But we need to understand what it's going to take in changing the way we work, in changing our priorities, in really recognizing what needs to be done and how to bring people together effectively. It also sometimes, I think, means changing the personalities of our organizations to become much more focused on the user experience and much more focused on producing what's really needed rather than meeting the deadline. It means changing our mindset as well as changing the situation in which we work. I hope I've given you some ideas this morning and that you got some questions. I want to turn now to Stefan and Dustin and see if there are questions and comments from today's session. I put a little bit of contact information there if anyone would like to send me a note or so with some questions, but I'm happy to answer things that have come up. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, JoAnn. Currently, there are no questions in the chat yet. I guess the people were just listening to your interesting presentation. Wow. But I see that a couple of attendees are still typing, so maybe we wait a few minutes.
Well,
while you stop your sharing.
This is such a fun topic. It's so scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, maybe you can stop your sharing because then you can also see the chat.
That. Hey, people are typing.
Okay, I see there's a question.
Any strategies to get people who pass the scary part? I think any endeavor like this, where you're trying to start something new, is to look for where the interest lies. You've got a proposal to put together to say, we'd like to work together. Let's find the most interested partner. Let's get support from someone in senior management who becomes an advocate. Let's talk about what it costs us to do things the way we've been doing. One of the best ways of getting a change process in place is to create what we call a burning platform. Find the things that are really causing problems. I think, where some of this starts is to realize how many mistakes are being made. That first question I started with, are we documenting the same product that we're selling in our companies? And if you can say no, look what we've said here and look at what we've said there. And why are these errors getting out? Why is there this confusion of message? Find a burning platform. Find something that people will recognize as a really serious problem to the company. We're not doing this very well. We need to fix it. That's a great way to get started.
Absolutely. JoAnn, I can see there's another question, quite interesting one, I think, from Dennis Slattery. What do you feel about asking for feedback about document quality and corrections on a public-facing website?
Actually, that's a really
good
question.
Thanks
I think that it is smart to do it that way, because what you're trying to do is build trust, right? You're trying to ensure the customers that you're trustworthy, that if they mention something, that someone will take care of it. What we've seen, if we've looked at, the history of companies responding to problems, the companies that, where there's a crisis. Look at look at the Samsung crisis, for example, recently with the lithium-ion batteries. The first response was, we'll replace it with another phone. Very fast response to say, we're sorry, we're going to do something about it. In contrast to, say, the Volkswagen response to the manipulation of the fuel standards, that companies that have been aggressive in saying, we know there are mistakes, we know there are issues, we want to know about them because we're going to fix them. Now, of course, you got to fix them. You've got to get it on your list and show people that you're fixing things. I'm working right now with a company that hasn't had a good track record on that. In fact, the users became so discouraged that nothing was ever fixed that they stopped telling them about the problems and just went somewhere else. That's what you don't want to happen. So it's really the burning platform is really important to emphasize, getting past the scary parts too.
Thanks, JoAnn, for that. There's another one from Samantha Knowlton. Thanks so much for the inspiration. My company's documentation team, just me actually, is contained within the research and development team of the company and therefore very siloed from areas such as marketing or client care. What would you suggest as a first step to broaden my horizon and ability to collaborate with other departments? I think it's got to be
conversations, go introduce yourself to the client and the marketing or the client care, probably client care, the service people first. That's a really great way to find out what people are they talk to the customers. What are they learning? What are the things that are most important? How does this all come together effectively? You have a good excuse to go talk to customer care because, you want to find out, are we doing the right job? Are these the things that we need to learn? I know for many tech information developers, this is utter nonsense to say you shouldn't know about the customers. I think it's as important as anybody because, I feel quite strongly that content is part of the product. And we keep making that same case over and over again.
I see a lot of people have this problem and are facing the same challenge. So maybe that's another topic we could discuss at some later point, how to market technical documentation.
Service engineers are great sources of information. And they want to stop people from calling about things that could be explained better in the documentation.
Okay.
Because those are
yeah. Okay, we have just 5 minutes. We just have 5 minutes left before we start with the next presentation. So thanks again, JoAnn Hackos, for this wonderful presentation. Very inspiring stuff, I think. I will stop the recording for this session now and clear the chat. And then we can start with the next presentation. Thanks again for everyone who was attending this presentation. And please stay in the room, stay tuned. We're continuing in about 5 minutes with Young FM Grad about DITA 1.3 and Framework 2015.